Hi, my name is Jody, and I'm here tonight to prepare a meal as part of my assignment for the class From Farm to Fork. The goal of the meal is to prepare something using the skills or the knowledge I've learned in class, in addition to making a meal that is sustainable and healthy. I've prepared a meal tonight that is pretty typical of how I eat, with the exception of attempting to be more healthy and incorporate sustainability by taking out dairy, which I eat in abundance, or use and cook with in abundance, or I had until I've taken this class. I've also tried to use foods that are local, wild harvested, or responsibly grown, which I have never really even thought about in the past. I live remotely in Alaska, and some of my food choices are quite limited. And I think just by the very fact that I live remotely and have to try to supply my own food from my garden, wild harvesting or hunting, it does embode the elements of sustainability, in that we don't have to travel long distances or spend fossil fuels to get it. They don't have a large carbon or water footprint, and I do try to supplement my diet as much as I can with these items without having to drive the long distance to town and spend the money on fuel. So tonight, what I'm going to be cooking is salmon, or it's wild-caught Alaskan sockeye salmon that I caught with a line and reel. It has a coconut curry glaze on it, and accompanying that is a quinoa pilaf with vegetables from my garden, a rhubarb crisp also made from my garden, a homemade Highbush cranberry mead using the honey from our bees, and a chaga tea to accompany the rhubarb crisp for dessert. So you'll see as this unfolds how I put this together and what I've substituted to try to make this meal a little bit more healthy and sustainable. Okay, let's start cooking. The meal I'm going to prepare tonight is fairly typical of the one I would eat. I'm trying to incorporate the principles of sustainability and health by substituting for dairy, which I eat a lot of, by wild harvesting what I can, or getting foods nearby. The menu tonight consists of wild Alaskan salmon that I caught with a line and hook that's been almond crusted and drizzled with a coconut curry sauce. Accompanying that will be a vegetable pilaf with the vegetables grown from my garden, and a rhubarb crisp accompanied by chaga tea. I will also be serving a Highbush cranberry wine with the meal. It's actually a Highbush cranberry mead that I produced using honey from our bees. I'm going to start off with dessert tonight, since that takes the longest to cook. What I have done is I have taken 4 cups of rhubarb grown from the garden. I have placed a half a cup of honey, substituting that for a cup of sugar, which I would normally use in this recipe, and the honey has been grown on our property by our bees. In addition to the honey, I have put in I've put in a half of a cup of ground up fireweed pith. It's the pith of the stem of the plant, and I use that as a thickener. It works fantastic, and we have so much fireweed on our property. It's something that's sustainable and comes back every year. For the topping, that's the hardest part for me, because I love to use butter, or I had before I took this course, and I'm trying to find ways to substitute. So for the topping, I'm going to take a cup of oatmeal. So in the dessert, I have 4 cups of rhubarb from the garden. In this rhubarb, I have placed 1/2 cup of honey and 1/4 cup of fireweed pith that we harvest from the yard. It's the ground up pith from the fireweed stem. We also use the leaves for salads, but the stem acts as a thickener, and it works quite well in place of flour or starch, which I would have to go quite a distance to buy. So that's what's in the rhubarb to start with. For the topping, that's the biggest challenge for me, because I love to use butter, and I'm trying to find ways to make it crispy and brown without using butter. So what I'm going to put in that is 1 cup of rolled oats, 1 handful, or approximately 4 dates. These dates kind of lend a sweetness, and it helps with the crunchiness and the browning when it comes out. And in substituting butter, in the past I've used 1/2 cup of butter. I'm using 2 tablespoons of duck fat. I've tried this with coconut oil or other types of oils, and it works okay. It doesn't quite get as crisp as it would with butter or duck fat, but I'm using duck fat not because it's necessarily more healthy, but maybe on the sustainable side. It's a byproduct of a meal I had the other night, and when I have the ducks, I do like to render the fat and cook them. And of course, we harvest the ducks right here on our property, wild ducks. So this is wild rendered duck fat that I'm going to be putting in the topping, substituting for butter. I don't think I've heard of anyone doing that before, but it works quite nicely as a substitute for this crisp, and it tastes very rich. The other thing that I'm going to add to this is a tablespoon of our raw honey from the bees on our property. It's a nice dark honey. It's not from just one plant. They get a lot of the nectar from the trees and the berries around. And it's a nice, rich, flavorful honey. I'm just going to mix this up so that it's crumbly. I think I'm going to transfer this and use my hands a little bit. A little tactile here. Okay. As you can see, it's quite crumbly and mixed well. I'm going to now transfer it to the top of my rhubarb. I'm going to spread it out. Try to evenly cover it. There we go. And now I'm going to put it in the oven as soon as I wash my hands, and we'll bake it at 350 for about 45 minutes. By the time that's done, dinner will be ready. Okay, our rhubarb crisp is now ready to put in the oven. I'm going to put it in at 350 and cook it for approximately 45 minutes until it becomes bubbly. The crisp may need some tin foil placed over the top of it if it starts to get a little too brown. Now I'm going to start cooking the main portion of the meal. The main portion of the meal is almond-encrusted, wild-caught Alaska salmon that I caught with a hook and a line. I'm going to dip it in an egg mixture that consists of 1 guinea hen egg that I bartered with my neighbor for. I gave her honey, and she gives me not only guinea hen eggs, but many times the guinea hen broth that is left over from when she cooks the hens up for her dogs, her sled dogs. So tonight I'll be using both guinea hen eggs and guinea hen broth that has been bartered for from my neighbors. I'm going to dip the salmon fillets, and these are 6-ounce fillets of red salmon that I have removed the pin bones from. That's why you might see a little groove here. It just makes it a lot nicer when you go to eat it, especially if you have children. I'm going to dip it in the guinea hen egg. The guinea hen egg is smaller. There's a smaller amount of that than there is in a chicken egg, so you may have to add water, which I did, to make it go a little further. I'm going to dip first I'm going to grab my plate here, and I'm going to take the salmon fillet and I'm going to dip it in the guinea hen egg mixture. It's a little messy, but not too bad. In this bowl I have a 1/2 cup of coarsely chopped almonds. And I'm going to roll that really good in the almonds so that it coats the almonds, coats the salmon, and I'm going to stick it in this plate for right now. I'm going to do all 4 fillets. This is for 4 people. So each person would get a single 6-ounce fillet of wild-caught red salmon. And this is sockeye salmon. You notice the bright red pigment on here, reflective of the animals that they eat, the wild krill and other animals that they eat. in this last fillet, almost just right. Just right for the amount of almonds that we have encrusting the salmon. Now I'm going to take a tablespoon of my rendered duck fat, and I'm going to place it in my frying pan and get it hot, and I am going to just brown or sear these salmon fillets. After they've been browned, I will take them out of the pan, stick them in a baking dish, and place them in the oven on 250 while I prepare the sauce. By the time I prepare the curry sauce, these should be just about ready to eat. Now I'm going to take my rendered duck fat, 1 tablespoon, place it in my cast iron skillet. I was trying to figure out a way to sell the cast iron skillet as being sustainable, since I don't wash it out that often, but I do have to wipe it out, and that then gets washed, so I guess it's not all that sustainable. But I'm going to heat up my rendered duck fat on medium until it's hot and bubbly, and then I will be placing my salmon fillets in that and lightly browning them. So I now have my duck fat heating and hot, and I'm going to stick my salmon fillets crusted with the almonds inside of the hot duck fat. I'm just going to let them cook on either side for about a minute and a half, and then I will take them and put them in the oven where they can finish cooking once they've become golden brown. So now that I've browned my salmon, I'm going to take it out of the pan. My fillets, they look wonderful. Nice and golden brown, but not quite cooked through all the way. You can see them here. I'm going to put these in the oven at 250 so that they can keep warm and finish cooking while I make the coconut curry sauce. The next stage of the meal is to do the coconut curry sauce that will drizzle on top of the salmon fillets. So I'm going to take a little bit of the rendered duck fat, put it in my saucepan. Using this in place of butter, I'm going to make a roux. I have 2 tablespoons of my ground up pith of the fireweed plant that I'm using instead of flour. You know, I can get flour where I live, but it's a long ways to the store. It's a lot less of a water and carbon footprint to use this, and the plant comes back every year. So 2 tablespoons of the pith of the fireweed plant. It's a little green. Sometimes it's hard to get all the outside of the stalk off, but it still tastes just fine. I'm going to mix that until it forms a roux and browns just a little bit. So we'll thicken our sauce. I'm additionally going to add my bartered for guinea hen broth. Right here, 1 cup of bartered for guinea hen broth. We traded for this with my neighbor for our honey. I will also be putting in a cup of coconut milk that was purchased from the store, a teaspoon of curry powder, a tablespoon of our all-natural honey, our wild and raw honey, and a little salt and pepper to taste. This looks like it's browning nicely and thickening up, so I'm going to add my guinea hen broth. And I'm going to stir this vigorously so that I don't get any lumps forming. And get that fireweed pith. There we go, all dissolved. It looks nice. I'm going to let that thicken just a little bit. And after that thickens, I'm going to remove it from the heat, add my coconut milk, my powdered curry, and my tablespoon of honey to sweeten it up a little bit. Now that my sauce has thickened, I'm going to take it off of the stove. I'm going to add my 1 cup of coconut milk. I'm going to stir that in. I'm going to add approximately a tablespoon of honey, of our raw honey, and stir that in. And a teaspoon of my of curry powder, a pinch of pepper, a pinch of salt, Stir. And we have a lovely coconut curry sauce in a pale lemony yellow that's going to taste wonderful on that almond crusted salmon. I'm going to put this aside and quickly make the pilaf, the quinoa pilaf, and we'll start with that. Now I'm going to start with the quinoa pilaf. I'm going to start with putting a little bit of duck fat in the pan, just a smidgen to coat the bottom. I'm going to put in approximately 3 chopped shallots from my garden, 1 cup of celery from the garden, 1 cup of diced carrots, baby carrots, nice young little carrots from the garden. And I'm going to saute those, for about 3 minutes until they become slightly tender and the shallots start to turn translucent. Okay, after about 3 minutes, our celery and carrots and shallots have all turned this nice, vibrant, bright green and orange. About 3 minutes. I'm now going to add the zucchini, which doesn't take as long to cook, and kale, all again from my garden. About 1 cup of each. I'm going to stir that in here. Cook these for approximately, 2 minutes. And then I'm going to add the quinoa, and we will have our quinoa pilaf completed. I'll tell you what that looks like right there. Okay, now that I've cooked all the vegetables or sauteed all the vegetables, including the kale, I'm going to add the pre-cooked quinoa, 2 cups. I'm going to just lightly stir it in with the vegetables to warm it up. And this should be ready to serve. Quinoa pilaf. I'm now going to put my plate together. Our salmon should be finished. And we have our lovely sauce, and we'll start our meal. All right, now we have taken the salmon out of the oven. I'm going to plate it up, a nice 6-ounce piece of salmon. Some nice vegetable, some quinoa pilaf to go with the salmon. Nice and bright. Get a couple pieces of kale in there. And I'm going to drizzle my salmon with our coconut curry sauce. Here you go. And with our meal, I'm going to serve a homemade Highbush cranberry mead. I've made this myself. I used honey from our bees, spring water from our property, and I bartered for the Highbush cranberries from a family in Fairbanks whose children picked them for me in exchange for some smoked salmon. The Highbush cranberry is actually not a true cranberry, and it tastes more like a wild currant, but it is a wild berry picked after the first frost, after it's had all summer, the long Alaskan days of sunlight to develop ascorbic acid and sugars. So it's a wonderfully pungent but flavorful berry, and I love to make my mead with it. So we'll put a little, it's somewhat dry, but not too dry. Try to do about 4 ounces with our meal. There you go. And for dessert, I'm going to, in just a minute, take out that rhubarb, and we'll see what that looks like for dessert. We're going to have rhubarb crisp and some chaga tea. Chaga is a fungus that's grown in the northern trees, or trees at high altitude, and that is usually, I harvest it from the birch trees like most people do. I know it can grow on some other species, but it's a wild harvest fungus growing on the trees, and it doesn't damage the trees to remove the chaga, but the chaga is delicious. It tastes like a tea with a slight herbaceous or perhaps a root beer, a taste of a root beer a little bit on the back of the tongue, since it is from a birch tree, the same as where we originally got the root beer flavoring from, though it's a different species of birch tree. So we're serving chaga tea, which I harvested from my property, with the rhubarb crisp for dessert. And we'll have that up in just a minute. I've just taken the rhubarb crisp out of the oven. It's nice and brown on top and ready to serve. I'm going to serve about a half a cup serving of the rhubarb crisp, and I'm going to serve our chaga tea with the rhubarb crisp. And there we have it, our wild-caught Alaskan salmon, our vegetable quinoa pilaf, homemade Highbush cranberry wine, rhubarb crisp, and a chaga tea, all in the spirit of sustainability and health.